Everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing a Q&A from Jack here. He has this monster truck garage design, which is pretty cool for his grandson. And he basically has a printer that's a little bit smaller than his design. So he's asking about how to get the roof to go together. And it looks like he actually figured out a solution for that. And then another question he had was about a hinge for the roof. So I'm going to pull it up in Fusion and we'll go ahead and see what we can do. All right, so this is the design file. And he's done a really good job with the design overall. Just a couple tips maybe or I guess suggestions I would have. So on the bottom here he's added fillets, and instead of fillets I would add chamfers to this, just because you're probably going to be printing this the four, especially bottom down. So I would probably just change these to small fillets. So I'm going to go in and actually just take these off here, and the reason I'm doing that is for the stair stepping effect, and it would probably turn out pretty good the way he has it, but just personally prefer chamfers, and they usually come out better when you do that in the plane of the print bed. And I have some short form videos on this. Some of them are a little bit older at this point, but that's just what I would do. And I'm going to take these off here, but actually up here it might be okay, and I'll talk about that more in a second, just based on the printing orientation that I'm going to suggest for these. So that is what I would do. So he has 1mm chamfer there, and this is just part of what I think about when I'm doing 3D printing. So I'm going to click OK, and then now I'm going to come back and add a small chamfer here and make this like, let's see, yeah, 1mm. And it's a different design look. Let's see, why is that having issues? It's probably right here, I bet, is the issue. I'm also going to suggest, I'm not going to go back and find this feature. I'm just going to use Q, which is press pull, and then pull this up a little if it'll let me. Yeah, click OK. And so the reason I'm doing this is because you want to have, so before I'm just going to show, you want to have a little bit of a wall or a step off. So if you're thinking about the printer, it's really going to struggle with this because it's so thin here. So basically what I did was I used press pull here. I can just grab this and come up a little bit and click OK. And so now this is 1mm, and you don't have to make it 1mm, but basically you want to have at least a couple layer lines so that it doesn't have issues printing this. And it is a little bit of a step. You could probably get away with like 0.6 or so, but I'd try at least 3 layer lines just so that this feature will come out okay. And then I'm going to try that chamfer again, see if it'll work this time. Yeah, so now it's working, and probably not even 1. I'll probably go with like 0.4 or so. So that's 2 layer lines, and you can see here how that'll look, and this will just come out a lot better. It's hard to visualize with 3D printing, but if you can imagine, there'll be a layer line there and then another layer line, and they'll all go up vertically if you're printing this like with this on the print bed. And I think that is a suggestion that's my suggestion. And the reason, if you think about the curve that was there before, if you zoom really far in and you think about the layer lines, and you'll have the first layer line here, and then the curve would be coming out, it's a radius, so the next layer line would have a little bit of an overhang. And it's not really a big deal with smaller features like this, but at some point, if you have a really big curve, the layer line is basically going to be an overhang, and that's how you get the stair stepping pattern, because the printer G-code is trying to match a curve. As you visualize a curve, each layer is a little bit of an overhang, whereas this is just a straight angle, so it's just kind of a consistent overhang every time. Basically the overhang is the same, or basically a 45 versus like a changing overhang with the radius. So I have a video on that. Go and check it out if you're interested. It's a short form video, and also have a long form. So if you're interested, check that out. And so I'm going to click OK with that. And then you can also do the same thing up here, but based on the printing orientation, then this might be different. The main thing he was asking about is how to combine the roof here. And so I'm just going to hide these other parts and focus in on the roof designs. I'm just going to select that. And so this is a harder problem because it's not only too wide, but it's also too long. So his printer, this is 225mm. His printer can do about 170 or so. And then this width here is, let's see, 303. So we would at least have to split this in the middle. And I wonder here, I think he has everything centered around the origin. So I'm just going to split the body with the origin and see if that's down the middle roughly. And so it does look like it's down the middle. So that's good. And one thing that I like to do, and I think he's basically already done this, is use a feature to be my split point. So you can see here he has these little divots in the roof, and it just so happens that this seam that he designed would also be the split seam. So I like trying to do that because that kind of hides the two parts a little bit to some extent. And so now we have 151 millimeters. So we should be able to print this in one piece and this in one piece, but it's still a little bit too wide. So I'm also going to split it this way as well. So now another thing we want to do is to add a midplane here. So again, remember that this is too long, so we have to split it this way as well. So we're going to add a midplane between this face and this face, and then click OK. And so now we see that we have a plane down the middle here, and so we can use that to split as well. So I'm going to click split body again, and then we're just going to select that, and then we're also going to select this as well, so it's going to split all of them together, and so that should go ahead and split. And so now we have 4 different pieces. And so again, there's a lot of different ways you could do this. The way that I like to do it, and I've done this previously in the past with different designs, is to basically just make basically a slot mechanism, and that usually works pretty well, especially when the parts are relatively thick. So this is around 7 millimeters thick, so I think it'll work out okay here. And so we're going to assume that this is the front, so we're going to make this as clean as possible, and so we're going to take that into account when designing this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a design here on the back, and I'm going to also kind of discuss the orientation for printing this at some point here as well. So I want to create a circle here on this part, and see that I'm drawing on this angle. So this is at an angle, which makes things a little more difficult, but since everything's straight, it shouldn't be an issue. So I'm going to make a circle here. I got my sketch turned off. There it is. I'm going to turn off these other sketches, and I'll rename that at some point, and then I'm going to create a center point rectangle, and I just use that because I can find the midpoint. If you can see a little triangle, that means I'm at the midpoint. And just come over a little bit, and then we're going to make this coincident with this, and then also make that at the midpoint here. And then the size of the circle can be, kind of vary depending on what you're trying to do. I don't want to make it too big because that'll make the wall too thin on the side. So I think 3 is probably good enough. And then I'm going to make this 2 millimeters. I think that'll work. And then for the width here, which is really only half of this dimension, I'm going to make it 4. And I think that'll probably be okay. Then I'm going to click Finish Sketch, and then make sure I bring my sketch back. And I'll just name this Slot. And so now we have a sketch there. And so I'm just going to extrude this part all the way out. And so I'm just going to cut it first. So I'm going to cut through both of those bodies, and I'm not going to go all the way to the end. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want this front piece to be as smooth as possible. So I'm going to click OK there. And so that should have cut through both of the bodies on this side. Yeah, you can kind of see how that other body is down at the end there. And then I'm going to bring that same sketch back up and then extrude again. And this time I'm going to actually combine it with this body. So I'm going to hide these other roof parts. So which one is it? So we want to hide. Let's see. Yeah, we want to hide that one. And we also want to hide this other one. Just going to hide them real quick. I'm just clicking D there. And so just extrude this out. And if I connected them both, which I really probably should have done this before splitting the bodies, but that's kind of hindsight is 2020. So I'm just going to go to here, distance to object. I'm just going to do it to this kind of split plane that we had. It should let me do that. There we go. Click OK. And so now I can just bring that other one back up. Let's see which one it is. There it is. And so then I'm going to extrude this again separately. I should be able to just join the one that I want to join, hopefully. This is how we can do it. So we can click extrude and then select these again. And then we're going to do start from object. And then I want to start from this kind of cutout. So we can see that cutout if you kind of hover over it. So I'm going to hold and click and hold and see if it'll let me select that face. And so I want that face right there. So the way I did that, if you're not familiar, if you just hover over kind of where you think something is and you hold the left click, it gives you these face options. So it lets me select between the two, and I want that kind of profile face. And so we want to do an offset here of about around 1 millimeter or so. And the reason we're doing that is we don't want the part to basically not go in far enough. And so I offset that flat piece a little bit. And so now this is coming out. We don't want to cut through. We just want to go all the way basically to this face. So we're going to do the distance here is going to be to object. It's going to be to this object. And then we want to make sure that it joins with the right body here. I'm going to turn this one off and then also that one off. And so now you can see what we made. So we made that other profile here. And you can see my offset is a little bit off the bottom of it. And you can play around with this amount. It doesn't always have to be 1 millimeter. We can do like 0.4 is probably enough depending on your printer. And then we're going to click OK. All right. And so now we have the 4 roof pieces, and this should work. The only thing we have to do now is add a little bit of tolerances. So keep showing that one. Okay. And so just to show you again, so we have these 2 slots, and the way that this will work is they'll slot together. And the only issue now is that these pieces are not kind of interconnected with each other. So we're going to have to add another feature for that. But we have basically the two split halves connected. And so you can do that, individually, and then basically make the piece kind of come together in the middle. And the way we're going to do that is I'm just going to add some kind of dowels in the middle. There's different options for that, but that's just one of the ones that I was thinking about. The last thing to do for these parts that I like to do is add a little bit of basically fillets here to make them go in a little bit easier. So I'm going to click F for fillet and then select these parts here, these little edges. And this just makes it print a little bit easier. So even let's do 0.6. Yeah, so something like that really helps. And you can see it kind of goes all the way down. Make sure we select this one as well since it's a separate piece. And again, you could have gone in a different order and probably been a little more efficient. But again, I'm trying to kind of show y'all just my thought process on it. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to go ahead and do this because sometimes it's hard to see the other one. So I'm just going to add 0.6 to the other one, or the other 2 here. All right, so fill it again. And we're just going to add the same amount to these. And then we're going to add a little bit of tolerance here as well, or a little bit of clearance depending on who you're asking, I guess. All right, so these are all 0.6. Okay. And click OK. And then now I want to make it where they'll slide a little bit easier. So I'm going to do modify press pull. And I just want to make it like -0.1 or so and make sure that that's actually getting applied, because sometimes it doesn't really show up very well. So it doesn't really look like that worked. Let's see. Try it again. Press pull. Sometimes I like to do like a little bit of an exaggerated thing to see if it's working. So I think I'm actually going to just go before here and do a press pull here. Sometimes press pull is a little finicky. Now it's working. Okay. Click OK. And this should still work. All right, and so now you can see, if you zoom in, there's a little bit of clearance there, and that's just for the tolerances of the printer and everything else. And usually about 0.1 is what I use. Depends on your printer, but this should make it where it'll slide together. And you can see here that there is no clearance here. So really it's just compensating for that as well if the edge isn't perfect. But this usually results in a pretty tight fit overall. And then here on this side, you can see that I want to hide this again. That on this end, you really can't even see that there's the joint because we have it kind of covered up, hidden back in there. So the way that I would print this, and this is kind of important for the purposes of this, is actually upright. So I would print it with this being on the print bed. And the reason for that is if you print it with this on the print bed, which is how most people would probably think about doing it, it's not going to do these slots very well because it'll be an overhang, or you have to use supports or something. Because if you think about this tube, there's nothing supporting the top of the tube as it's printing. If it's laid down, like this, is printing the tube part, or the slot part, and the top part is going to be overhanging. So if you print it like this, you won't need any supports. And these features are actually better if you print it that way because these are curves, and the printer will do well with those curves. And so that kind of leads into this fillet part. So I'm just going to delete that. And the way I would design this, again, I would probably have a fillet here, which seems like what he had before. So, and then you can add really a chamfer or something on the top, but I would probably leave the top flat. I think that would kind of give it a nice little feature there. So I'm going to add those back here just to make sure that the front and the back have the same little design on them. All right. And so I think that is about it. So the last part would be to add some type of cutout or something here to get these to go together. And you could do this a couple of different ways. One kind of limitation now is that if we're printing it this way, we can't really have anything that pokes out because this is going to be on the print bed. So we need to probably do some type of slot mechanism. And that's probably what I would recommend. It's not the most rigid thing ever, but it should work for this. So what I would probably do is just make some type of little dowel system and use hexagons. I've mentioned this a number of times on my different videos. I like the little hexagons, and they're just easy to do. They're simple to print, and they usually work pretty well. And if you just do a properly calibrated press fit for stuff like this, it should be fine. There's a lot more elaborate things you could do, but in general, I find that this works pretty well. So I'm going to make these 3 millimeters, and then I'm just going to dimension this 3.5 because I know that's the center of the 7 millimeter high part. It doesn't look like it's the center because these have the little details, so I might actually just do 3 just so that we don't mess up the detail there. So if you're considering this is the top end and this is the bottom, that's probably closer to the actual distance. And then I'm just going to find some kind of arbitrary distance there, and I'm going to click finish sketch. And then I'm just going to extrude these both directions here, make all this visible. So we're going to go, I don't know, let's do like 25 or so, and then do this symmetric. So it's going into both sides. And then the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to dimension, I'm just going to do one at a time, and then I'm going to dimension the pattern, so rectangular pattern of the features. Just going to be that. And then the axis, I'm going to use that as one of the axes. And then, let's see. Let's just do, and you could do a little bit better job of, making these symmetric and whatnot, but just for the sake of time, I'm just going to do what looks okay and click OK for that. And so now we should have 3 little dowels there. And so now I'm going to mirror that, if it'll let me, create a mirror of that pattern or of features of that initial one, as well as the pattern, and the mirror plane is going to be that mid plane, since everything's about the origin, which is a good design detail he did. And then click OK. And so sometimes that doesn't work. So let's see if I can do it a different way. Mirror, again, features. We're going to do both of these. Mirror plane is here. Sometimes if you change it, it works. I guess not. Okay, let's see. Another way to do this. So that's another little bit of a frustrating thing sometimes. Let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to extend this all the way to the end. Let's see how far. So it's 273 to the end. I did a 30 millimeter offset, so I'm going to say plus 30. And so now, basically what I was doing was I was back calculating the distance. So this was 30 millimeters off, I think. And so to get this 30 millimeters, I just said to the end and then added 30 because this is a negative value here. So you can see it's negative 273. So it's added 30, which brought it back 30 millimeters. So I'm just going to change this to like 6 and just make sure that the kind of split there is down the middle. And so that looks pretty close. It might not be perfect because if it's measuring from the edge of this hexagon, it would technically be like 1.5 millimeters off, but for the purpose of this tutorial, I think this should work. And I'm gonna click OK, and then we're just gonna make sure that we have those, and we don't. So I think the problem with this is we have, it's not picking up that this is a different body. So we might have to just make another one. I think it has to do with like it being a pattern. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to go back, edit sketch. I'm just going to make another one real quick. Actually, let's do this. So I don't usually recommend doing mirrors of sketches, but this is kind of one of those times where I think it would make sense. And then the mirror will be that. So now you see we have our hexagon over there. So, okay, finish. And so now we can make this back into 3. And our distance, we can do like 30, I think is what we had. And so now we can go and extrude the same thing again. Again, this is not the most optimized solution, but we're going to get there. So we did 50. All right, so I'm going to extrude this. It's going to be symmetric, 25 each side. And then we're going to do our pattern again of this. And it's going to be on this angle. And then we did 90. All right, and so now we finally have our features there. So now we have the different little plugs. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make one of these. So to make our little dowel rod, all I'm going to do is create another sketch here. And you could have done this on the first sketch as well, but I'm just going to offset this a little bit. So offset, and then see if we can select that. If not, we can project. So we need to project it first. Click OK, offset. And so we just want it to be a little bit smaller so that the rod will fit in there. And you might have to play around with this. I'm going to try -0.1, but it's going to really depend on your printer. And so then we're just going to try and select just that inner profile. And then last time we made these symmetric, basically 50 millimeters total, because we did 25 in both directions. And if we turn off that, so that's 50 millimeters. So I'm going to do like 24, and that's just giving you 2 millimeters on each side to have a little bit of play, just so that it doesn't prevent you from getting a tight fit there. And then I'm going to click OK. All right, and so now we have all of the parts again. And so you can see how that basically you'd have these 4 pieces, and then you have the dowels going across to anchor it this way, and then you have the slot going through the middle to keep these together. And so I think that would work for this design. I think it would turn out okay. You'd always have a seam down the middle here, but otherwise I think that should work all right. And then I guess, the last thing, he mentioned a hinge system, and so that sometimes can be a little bit more challenging just from the aspect of, there's a lot of ways to do it, and I want to try and get all the bodies to show up here. All right. Okay, and so now what I would do personally is I would make it where these have little like ridges inside of them, and they kind of sit down inside of this. So I would basically forget about the hinge and make it where it has kind of like a cubby to sit into. So the way I would do that is I would take this, and I would just have like a little extrusion along the side here with the angle so that you can print it since this is going to be oriented vertically, and print it that way. And that way you could just take the whole top off and put it back down. It would be a little fragile because of the joint here in the middle, but I think in general that would probably be a more clean solution, and it wouldn't have anywhere you put a hinge with a part this big, you're going to probably need something that's like relatively reinforced. And if kids are messing with it, it's probably pretty easy for them to break it, just to be honest. So this is what I would do is I would come here, and let's find a good spot to do this. I'm just going to draw it off the center, off the mid plane here. So, and I would basically project and get the edge of these parts here. And really could have done this beforehand. And then I'm also going to project this wall here. So I want to get the inside of that face. I'm going to right click and hold, and I should be able to select that. Yeah, so that's the inside wall. So I'm going to click OK on that. And I'm going to project the other inside wall here. So again, click and hold, and it lets you select that wall. And then click OK. I think that's the wall. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes. Okay. And so then what I would do is I would just make just a little group, basically like a little section here. It needs to be angled just so that it would print, because remember, we're printing this vertically, so we can't have a straight off overhang. You could and add a small little a little bit of supports, but I would just recommend doing it like this, and it should work okay. Make this, like 45 usually works pretty well, and this will just make it kind of sit in the right spot. You could do the straight angle, which I think actually I would probably go ahead and add the supports here. So let's actually redo this. Just going to make it parallel, and this is going to need a little bit of support, and we'll just design that real quick as well. So we're going to make this parallel, and then make this parallel to that, just because this won't really matter as much. And then make this one parallel as well. So that's perpendicular. That's fine. Just make it perpendicular how it was. Looks kind of funny, but that's okay. And then let's make this, I think 5mm is fine. And then you want to have a tiny amount of slack here, but I wouldn't have like a whole lot. You can mess around with that value some too. And then the distance here can be 10mm is plenty. And then I would just basically extrude this out, and it really doesn't have to be that big. So let's see, let's hide. Actually, we should be able to select it now. There we go. And so what I'm doing is making like a little notch where it should kind of fit pretty easily. What I would actually do is go all the way to this wall and then maybe offset it just a little bit. So let's see, extent to object. Make sure we select the wall again, press and hold, and you get the face. And so that's going to go all the way against the face. We want to offset like point. I'm going to make sure that's the right direction first. Yeah, so positive is the right direction. So I'm going to do like -0.4 or so. So that's leaving like a tiny little gap between the wall and our little offset. And so I'm actually going to do this in both directions, and I'm just going to split it again. And this will also kind of lock everything in a little better as well. So yeah, so now I'm going to click OK. And so now we have a way to kind of make sure it's in there, if that makes sense. So you could do a similar thing up here, and that would kind of reinforce everything a little bit. But I think this would probably be enough. And then it would also allow you to kind of lift it up. That would kind of act as a little bit of a hinge. It would fall out if you lifted it all the way up, but you could kind of peek inside without taking it all the way off. And I just think this is a little bit cleaner mechanism than a hinge, and it wouldn't break as easily. So the other thing we're going to have to do now is, this is probably, yes, is one piece again. So we need to split this again, or we can just, actually probably be easier, honestly, just to do one side at a time. So let's just do one side. Okay. And then we'll just repeat that same thing again on the other side. All right, make sure that it's going to join with the right body. I'm going to hide that one. And then we're going to go distance to object again. We're going to go to this wall here. And then we're going to do an offset of, just make sure it's the right way. Yeah, 0.4. And so again, you can see here, it's 0.4 off of that wall. And then we need to make sure that our roof that we want to join with is not hidden. It looks like our roof got joined together at some point, which is not the intention. It was probably on that last extrusion. Let's see here. Yeah, so need to make sure that on this one, let's just do new body, and then I'll combine them here at this point. Yeah, new body. Okay, and so what we'll have to do here is we can just join these. So combine that with that. Okay. And then combine this and this. Okay. And so now the last thing to do is going to be, if we're going to print these upright, you can see that we'll need some type of support here. And so what I like to do for stuff like this, really, I think it'd probably be fine just to use the standard supports, especially something like this. It's not really going to be seen that much. So I would just make sure that there's like tree supports or something under here. And then, yeah, that should work. And just make sure you print 4 or 6 of these little hexagons. And the last thing I would also recommend here is just to go ahead and add a chamfer. So like 0.4 or something like that, just because the ends sometimes are hard to get started. So that should help with that. And so I think that is how I would do this. I know it was a little bit of a longer video, but just something that hopefully some of y'all will get something out of. Just trying to explain my thought process. And obviously there are a lot of ways to do this, but I think that is how I would do it. The other option, which I did in video where I made the AMS mounts, was basically have like a dowel and pin system. And that would also work. It's just a little more challenging to do, I think, in general. So yeah, I think that's it. If you have any questions or want to submit your design to be reviewed, please join the community and I'll try to get to it. Thanks for watching.